So welcome to Talking Shop in the Shop. I'm your host, Frank Ucciardo with orderplans.com, a division of PKAD Architecture and Design. And thanks for joining us this week. We've got a very special session here with some of the very best professionals in the real estate transaction space. We're excited to kind of talk through the process. We know it's a difficult market out there right now, and so we thought we would bring some of the very best here to talk about what does the process look like, maybe some great pointers for buyers, for sellers, for homeowners, from other professionals that want to glean from the best. And so, without further ado, we have some of our guests here today.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Frank, for having me here. My name is Luis Bigit, the president and owner-operator of Northeast Inspections, performing commercial and residential building inspections.
Great.
Yeah, Frank, thanks for having us. It's great to be here. I'm Jamie Gallagher. I'm a loan officer with Fairway Independent Mortgage. To really simplify that, I meet with individual clients, families that are looking to purchase homes and want to understand what they qualify for in the residential mortgage market.
Great, it's nice to be here surrounded by such qualified individuals. My name is Josh Taub. I am the partner of the real estate law firm Taub and Bogaty. We strictly handle residential real estate transactions in the state of New York.
Hi Frank, thanks for having me. I'm very proud to be part of this group. I'm Karen Larson with Coldwell Banker American Homes. I'm a real estate agent that deals in both commercial and residential sales and leases.
Great. And so, thanks for coming in. And just as when you said, this group, right? We're all a part of an organization called LTIP, where we see each other weekly. And in that, I thought it was, it's sort of a natural. We've got a very strong real estate transaction space that's covered. We call it a power group in the group. And maybe Jamie, why don't you just give a little talk up of LTIP, and because I know you've been a part of the organization for like 20-something years.
Yeah, sure. So LTIP is a professional networking group, which gives me the opportunity to be the only person in the mortgage category space, and it allows me to network with other professionals that are out there doing transactions and looking to introduce their clients to like-minded professionals. So I have an ongoing relationship with a number of people right here that are speaking right now. I know the ins and outs of their business, have a great experience working with them, and then confidently refer my clients to them for the services that they specialize in.
Yeah, and I remember when I came and evaluated it, it was you and it was Brad Siegel from the group that impressed me the most. And I said, if these guys are attached to this caliber of professional, it's attached to this, there has to be value here, right? And I love that it's just not anybody off the street, right? We vet folks.
Yeah.
You're an attorney. Talk about the vetting process.
Yeah, to become a member, you have to attend meetings. Your business has to get inspected by one of our inspectors of the group. We make sure that you're actually who you say you are,
right,
and that you can commit to the obligations of the group. You have to give business. You have to show up. You have to participate. If that's not for you, then LTIP isn't for that person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I know actively now, we're just a shameless plug. The group is, we're missing a couple of seats. And you guys want to talk about what we'd like to see?
Yeah, especially within the group that we're in, we're very strong real estate power partners here. We could definitely use a mover. That seat is open.
Mover's open. Who else?
We could use a handyman.
Handyman. So trades, we need a handyman.
Exterminator.
Yes. We said straight plumber. Electrician? No.
Plumber, yeah. The trades are hard. We're always looking for tradespeople. It's hard for them to put time aside on a Tuesday morning, but for those that can, it's a great opportunity to develop more relationships.
Great. So this is occurring naturally, right? We've, the real estate professional, the attorney, we've got the mortgage professional, the inspector, the architect, pretty much everybody. Right, Karen?
Absolutely. When somebody calls me and they say, well, I want to put my house up for sale, the first thing I do is I go over their home, I take a look at it, I've done my studying, and I come over with a market analysis for them.
When you say studying, what does that mean?
So I have to study the neighborhood, the house, and how many bedrooms, how many
Sure.
bathrooms. I discuss with the homeowner if anything's been updated in the last several years. I look at the size of the property, and then I take a look at 3 homes in the area that are available for sale that are very similar to that house.
Right.
We want to know, what are people pricing their homes at?
Right.
That's similar to this one. I also look at 3 properties that are under contract. We want to see what the price of the home is to facilitate the sale. We won't know what the sale price is yet,
Right.
but at least we know where it's priced
gets
to
you to
get
the right-
things going,
the right
to get under
ballpark.
contract. Right.
Right.
And also look at 3 homes that are similar in that neighborhood that have sold within the last 6 months. We want to see current market conditions.
Right.
That's reviewed with the homeowner. And then once they give the green light to go forward and we pick the
Right.
price, I come up with their exclusive marketing plan, and that's when all the phone calls
Start to go out.
Oh, and immediately,
Yeah.
imperative that I get you involved right from the beginning. We need to engage in due diligence
Right.
to see that all permits have been closed
Right.
out. That's what we need
Right,
you for.
right.
Our certificate of occupancy is in order, very important.
Right. So you're going to, are you going down to the town yourself, or is that something that you're going to, farm out to another professional?
Right, which is the architect, which is you.
Right, or the
And-
expediter, right.
And the expediter, we want to know up front what needs to be done and what's missing.
Right.
We don't want to wait until the last minute. It will hold up the closing.
Right. So, okay, so let me ask you this question. A seller is relocating out of state, they come to you. You secure the listing,
Yes.
right? They decide to use you to assist in selling and marketing their house. From the time that they sign to the time that they actually close, right? They're at the table and everyone's like signing a million pieces of paper, writing
Sure.
checks,
Yes.
and nobody knows what the hell.
Signing their life
Yeah.
away.
Right, sign their life
Yes.
away. How long does that typical process take from nose to tail in this market? Not 2020 where you could sell a 3-legged dog with one eye.
Right.
And they had 87 people lining up to see the house, and they got bags of cash. I mean, that's not
No.
happening now, right?
Right.
Right.
So,
what would you say time frame?
of course, each transaction
Right.
is different,
Yeah.
but I would say on the average, 3 months, possibly 4.
For it to go from I want to sell to open houses
To
we're gonna
getting under
close, and
contract,
There's a
to-
check, and the new owner's smiling, and they're carrying their bride across the threshold.
Right. It can be shorter if all due diligence is done up front.
Right. What's worst? I mean, worst case scenario, but let's just say it lingers. Like, you would hope for 3 to 4 months, but what could it
If,
be?
it's something where it's an estate sale, these things can really linger on for a year. Gets caught up in courts.
Oh, bad.
Yeah,
So that's worst case scenario.
that's worst case
And then
scenario.
so let's maybe bring it down and say, like, the bell curve is, you're saying 3 to 4 months, somewhere in that ballpark.
Could take longer
6
if,
months.
it could,
-ish?
yes, absolutely.
Right.
If the due diligence isn't done at the beginning and waiting to the end for the buyer to find out instead of the seller,
Right.
that's a problem.
Right.
It can definitely hold up.
So homeowners, need to buckle up for a process.
Right.
This is not.
Even Luis has to come in right
Right.
at the beginning. Why wait for the buyer to send in their home inspector to find out problems, what's not up to code, what railing is missing, maybe the buyer's in love with the deck and, well, maybe it's not secure. It could be a million different things, or the outlet's all up to code. Let's find out at the beginning.
So you're suggesting that Luis comes in on the seller side.
That's right.
So maybe talk to that.
Pre-listing inspection.
Oh, so talk
Yep.
about a pre-listing inspection.
Okay.
What's that?
Pre-listing inspection is basically taking a look at your property prior to putting it in the market, because the buyer is going to bring their own inspector, and he's going to find out a lot of things about the house that maybe shouldn't be in that condition. There's so many problems that could be, with the house, like underground oil tanks, for example. Those
Oh
could
my
be
God.
big red flags.
Why is it a red flag?
Because if the tank is leaking, most of the tanks, the majority of the tanks have a lifespan of about 25 to 35 years.
So
And
if
imagine
it-
most of these houses are, over 60 years. So that tank has got to be in bad shape.
Right. So if William Levitt
Mm-hmm.
installed that tank
Yes,
with the problem.
it could be a problem.
Yeah.
And once you have oil leakage, for example, on the ground, the EPA gets involved, and that can drag the entire
And
process
is that a cheap?
across.
Is it cheap
No,
to remediate?
very expensive process.
Very expensive.
Right, and this is why Karen is saying it's not a 2-month deal. It could take months and years,
Right.
possibly.
So,
go through this inspection.
so a pre-inspection listing that is, and that cost is covered by the
It's covered by the seller,
seller.
Mhm.
but
Right.
Louis usually gives a little break there for
Yes,
the pre-listing.
right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, the prices are cheaper because,
Yeah.
we don't have to go through the whole thing.
Correct.
But it's important for them to know, do I have asbestos? Do I have mold? Do I have water infiltration? Do I have a good roof? How old is the roof? And all of those things. It's very, very
So
important.
you come down to, let's just say, and this is sort of industry knowledge that
Yes.
a homeowner may not know.
Exactly.
You come in and the basement is finished,
Yes,
and you don't see a single egress window.
correct.
What is that making you think?
It's a problem. It's a big problem.
Why is that a problem? What is an egress window versus an awning window?
Okay, the problem relates is not as much of someone trying to get out of the basement in case of an emergency. The problem also becomes the firemen, in the case of an emergency, coming in to save that person. So that's why most basement occupancies are not of legal nature.
They're not legal nature.
Correct.
And then-
you can have a secondary means of egress.
Right.
A sprinkling system could be a secondary means of egress. But again, it's all about the firemen also trying to get into
Right.
the house to save that person.
Right. So now you come into a basement
Yes.
that's finished.
Mhm.
There's no egress window.
Yes.
So you know that that's probably not, and I know that's probably not legal. And
Correct.
now the homeowner says to you, well, I bought it like this. I bought a 1964 built home, right? Basement's finished. Now I have an egress door out, but
So the codes change all the time.
Oh,
That's
boy.
why it's so important to get you guys in right from the beginning.
because if they don't, now what happens? So now you
Well,
have,
now I have to advise the seller, look, the stove down there has to come out. Can't have that staying in there. Or you have to go ahead and legalize everything, and that can take, time. If you're involved, it's done in less than 20 days, right?
correct, correct.
So-
So you're charting to sort of head them off at the pass before
Right.
there's a problem. Because
Absolutely.
now your buyer comes through, and then what happens? They love it, they like the price. Now what do you do?
And the buyer may say, I don't care that it's not legal. Well, guess what? The appraiser from the bank is going to care. Your attorney is going to care. The attorney is looking out for the best interests of their client. The attorney is going to want to make sure everything is legal.
Right.
So it's going to hold up the process to get to closing.
So now, so the inspection happens, and now maybe the call comes to,
So once the inspection happens and we know that we need to get everything made legal, the call comes, well, to you if you haven't already been called.
Right.
Right? And then we need to get the proper contractors in there to fix everything.
That's on a pre-listing inspection. But for example, if
Yeah.
if I have been called to a buyer's inspection.
on a
already,
buyer's inspection.
Right, now I'm gonna list
So now,
all
now you are, your responsibility is to the buyer.
to the buyer,
You're
correct?
coming in to sniff out what's the problem with
Exactly,
this.
and I would mention an illegal occupancy in the basement per se,
Right.
or the house has a converted garage from a garage into a living space.
Right.
And if it's not listed in a certificate of occupancy, it is an illegal occupancy.
Right.
And that kind of thing.
Right, so these things are kind of coming up, but now Josh gets involved.
Yes.
Yes,
So Josh really doesn't come fully into the picture until we're going under contract. He's part of the team. The introduction's already been made. I always tell the seller or the buyer, get your team together now so that all your ducks are in a row and we're ready to move when the time comes. So Josh, as the seller's attorney, will come in when he has to send out the contract.
Sure. Going back to the CO discussion, however, a lot of times, if the seller is an estate or trust, they're not going to be interested in legalizing the converted garage or legalizing the finished basement. I mean, almost never finished basements are legalized.
Right.
So I think it's really important from the seller side to set the expectations up front with the buyer, the potential buyer, with the potential buyer's attorney, and let them know, hey, this is the house, this is the way it is. It has a in-ground swimming pool that's been there for 20 years, but we have, as sellers, have no intention of legalizing it for you. The buyer can be like, that's okay, that's fine, and then if that conversation happens prior to contract, you have less issues at the closing table, and the file will close, because the buyer's attorney, while they'll recommend that the pool should be legal, they're not going to say, I refuse to allow you to close and
Right.
buy the house you want to buy and live there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So expectations is really, really
That's
important.
a great
you know,
point. Right.
Like she said, you don't want it to come as a surprise, where like you're in contract and the title is ordered, and we find out, oh, there's an open permit for a Florida room from 1983 that has never been closed out. That's not a good thing. If,
Right.
if it's a surprise, the buyer's attorney is going to be all over the seller to legalize it and get compensated for it, and then the seller's not going to want to do it. They're going to
Talk
say,
about
oh,
that. Slow down.
They're gonna say,
And
"This is
talk
how we
about
bought
this
it."
nightmare.
Yeah, it
That's
happens
where-
all the time.
So talk about that.
yeah, I mean, the nightmare is when things aren't legal or there's open permits for something, that the seller a lot of times has to leave money post-closing and take care of it. They're basically retaining the responsibility to legalize something after they've already sold the house. It's very difficult to coordinate, professionals to go in and out of the house and inspections when you don't have control of the house. You're not living there.
Right.
So it takes cooperation from the buyer, cooperation from the seller. The attorneys have to now work post-closing on the file, which obviously we prefer the file to close and not have any issues after closing. That's ideal.
Right.
But we do what we have to do, and if that's what's required in the situation, we'll
So it's
We'll do it.
cleaner if the issues are identified earlier,
100%.
as opposed to being surprised.
Yes.
Because then the money man comes along, right? And
Yep.
now the bank's involved.
Yep.
And we're funding this whole deal.
Correct.
And so talk about
Yeah,
your
so-
position.
So the more, just for starters, good listing agents like Karen Larson have the hardest job in the business, and they're in the transaction for the longest time. They're taking the listing, and that's working with the client to bring it to the market, and then actually going into contract for another 2 months. So that's a very challenging part. Someone like me, the finance person, comes in later. We maybe have a buyer that's interested in that property, or maybe we had the opportunity where Karen introduced us to that client. But really what we are is we're just making sure the buyer is prepped on their finances and understand that we want to make the money available to them at the closing. And we're relying on these great partners here to do that advanced work, understanding really the layout of the property. What do the buildings really look at, so they really truly know what they're selling when they go to contract with their attorney. What's the condition? Luis is a critical person, but the center of the universe in the real estate transaction that makes that transaction go is the realtor. We come in making sure the client's well aware of their finances and every aspect of the fees that are associated with the deal, but having great agents and great attorneys and great inspectors to lay that out before you get the contract, that's why these partners are so critical to me in making sure we have a smooth transaction.
Gotcha. So, as I'm listening to this, it's about the pre-listing work. You really have a heavy lift of setting expectations. So, if you had to talk to a young, or let's say a
First-time home buyer.
first-time home buyer, or I'm thinking about the realtors, right? You've been in this industry a long time.
Yes.
Somebody that maybe just getting in, or somebody that's has a couple years under their belt, or got in during the COVID years where you could sell anything. But now it's a different space. If you had to talk to them, if you can go back and rewind and say, I wish I'd done this better, right? What would you tell them?
Well, education is so important. The laws are constantly changing. It's imperative to know what you're doing. It's imperative to research and research and research and help your seller or buyer the best you can to get them to a smooth closing. There's a lot involved, as you're hearing. There's even more involved. They just need to know every part of the business
Right.
from A to Z.
Right.
And you'll never know it all. There's
Right.
so much, but constantly get educated. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Go out to your broker, go out to the owner of your agency, and ask.
So it sounds like the pre-work, especially now in this market, makes your job easy, makes your job easy, and it makes the transaction from the seller standpoint, who might be selling under duress, right? Like, I got to get out of here.
Well,
I'm
that's-
leaving. You're trying to time. I'm buying this other property.
Absolutely,
Oh
it
my
can be
God.
very, very stressful, and that's why if I know they have a date that they have to be out by, It's very, very important to get all these wrinkles ironed out right from the beginning.
Right. So, you know, and gentlemen, maybe Josh or Jamie could talk to this piece. You have a client selling a property they've been living in for 20 years, right? And they have all these little sort of, you know, listen, I don't want to separate with the dollar unnecessarily. I understand. But could you talk to the big picture of, you know, maybe upfront costs in relation to what they're sitting on?
Sure. I mean, I could definitely touch on that. You know, in the mortgage space, the most challenging thing for any, you know, home buyer, and there's the first-time home buyer, which this process is so new, it's tremendously stressful. If you have someone that's moving up, maybe this is their second or third home, they're probably trying to sell a home and buy a new one, a very large, stressful situation. Then you have people that are parents and have kids in moving school districts that are involved in that. And then you have seniors who are maybe a different place in their life and might be moving to another state. And that comes with stress. So as a mortgage lender, our singular focus is just to do as much lifting on the finance side and just make sure what we consider the two most important numbers. We want them to be clear on what their payment might be and then how much cash they might need to close. Now that's made up of two pieces. That's your down payment and your closing costs, which in the New York tri-state area can be formidable. Maybe you've only done this once or twice in your life, or it's the first time. You're hearing these numbers for the first or second time in the last maybe 10 or 15 years. So our goal is to just really try to keep the stress down, let them know that they can accomplish the things that they're trying to do, make sure they're clear on their numbers, and if we could take that off their plate and they're familiar with their numbers, then they can focus on some of the more important things, negotiating a contract and working with an agent.
Right, right. So they'd be mindful of the big picture, right? They're going to have closing costs, soft costs, right, associated with it. There's no getting, like, many times they're going to need a survey.
A survey is a very important tool. That
tell me.
yeah, I mean, a survey.
Look, you lit up like a light bulb.
Yeah, because I always have to, you know, sell it to potential buyers or buyers of real estate because they want to keep their costs down. They're always concerned with costs, but you have to understand you're buying a home for a minimum of what, $500,000 now, minimum.
So you're either giving or receiving
right.
$500,000.
Exactly. So it's the biggest purchase of their life.
Right. So this is a decently sizable number.
Absolutely.
$500,000.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Right. And what does the survey run?
$800. $800.
Right.
And it tells you so much.
Correct.
What is it telling you? It lets you know if the home is within the proper boundaries that you're buying. It lets you know if you have access to all of the property that you're supposed to be having access to by purchasing this house. A lot of times there are fence issues. There's your neighbor's fence is on your property, and that's somewhat of an issue, but it can get worse. Your neighbor could then put a shed up against their fence, and now you have your neighbor's fence and shed literally on your property. Mm-hmm. If you don't get a survey, you could buy the house. That could be prevalent and there, and you're going to close, and you're not going to know it's an issue. And then 5 years, 10 years down the line, your neighbor is going to sell and get a survey done, and you're going to have to deal with it. It doesn't matter if that's how you bought the house. It's just not a valid excuse. So always get the survey.
Always get the survey.
Yes.
So $800 versus $500,000.
Yeah, I mean, come on. We go to the supermarket and you see people, holding up cans of corn trying to save 10 cents.
Right.
So if you're spending $500,000, I think you should do your due diligence and make sure that your home is what you're supposed to be getting. That's
Correct.
for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
So now we have a pre-inspection
home inspection.
Right. Which is another soft cost.
Right.
Does it make sense? Before it gets to you.
Yeah, I mean, I generally see home inspections from the buyer's side, and you should always get the home inspection as well. I mean, unless you're a expert in, architecture and, heating, construction and all of the elements of a house that are important, you're not going to know if things are on their last legs. And the home inspection from a buyer's point of view is really to let the buyer make an educated decision if they really want to spend that $500,000.
Because they could take that $500,000 and go someplace else.
Of course, there's other homes that don't have issues that they could buy.
You walk onto the car lot and you visit several car lots, and now we have like,
for
oh,
sure.
do I want to take my hard-earned dollar
Right.
and buy this, or I can come over here and buy that?
Yeah, I mean, home inspections are key. I
Right.
mean, unless you're an expert in all the fields that Luis is an expert in,
Right.
you're not going to know exactly the house that you're buying.
Right.
And one of the things, maybe I didn't answer your question, perfectly. When we come in as the mortgage lender later in the process, when a client has been identified and they're drafting a contract, your mortgage lender, you pay for an appraisal. And our job, as far as the federal government, the New York State, Department of Financial Services position is that we're supposed to make everybody aware of all of their costs. Okay, the attorney's going to order with a reputable title company, and those title companies usually take care of the survey. But as the mortgage lender, we identify all the costs that are going to be down to the penny in the transaction, which really prepares the borrower and takes a lot of that off. And then the only things that we're not responsible for disclosing is what they've agreed to pay their attorney and that inspection that they're very definitely going to do in the beginning. So, when I meet with clients, I write, we give them in print everything that they're going to be facing, and then I handwrite, hey, by the way, you're going to want to do an inspection under the recommendation of your agent, and here's what your attorney might be talking about in terms of fee structures in our local area. So we identify the costs, we lay out one or two soft costs. We don't deal with the client that's selling the home. That's where Karen does all her good
Right.
work in prepping the seller
Right.
for things that they might
Right.
be facing.
Right. So you're prepping them, you're getting them a list of realistic expectations for costs that they're going to be responsible for, and then Karen, as I'm listening, I'm thinking about this homeowner, this buyer with $500,000. They're going to give this to, I remember when I closed and I left the table and I was talking with one of my mentors, and I was like, these people were so nice. And he's like, Frank, you just gave them a lot of money. And I was like, oh, I'm a stupid young, I'm sorry. I was a naive first-time home buyer.
Sure.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's right, Scott. I did give them a lot of money. Of course they were nice to me. So the seller has to market their property. They're marketing the property, making it sellable.
Absolutely.
And so, like, when I think of this, and I'm not a realtor, but I know, like, you got to sweep the floors and maybe bake some cookies so that when people come in, it smells nice. And you're doing all these things to say, please give me your money. But the things that, staging a house, right?
Absolutely. So, first of all, it's decluttering. So important.
Right.
People want to see space. They want to be able to picture themselves living in that home and living that lifestyle. It's not just about talking about the house and the features of the house. It's about having them picture themselves living this particular lifestyle.
Right.
And that's really when the marketing
Right.
comes into play.
Right. So you want to paint a picture of, could the nice person with the bag of cash is going to come now and occupy, we're going to exchange. But then, so that's the outside. But then the inside is, how do we get the transaction to go smooth? So you have the outside lifestyle, and now you have the brass tacks of it. The foundation of the transaction has to go off without a hitch.
Right.
Because they could love it, and they're here, and they say, oh, there's the party lights and my sunken, I don't know, here's the
Living
hot
room
tub
and
with the
the
pool,
deck
and
and-
it's beautiful, and the perfect, location. The bus comes and picks up my kids right from what a great district. Well, we're moving here to Hills West or whatever it is.
Sure.
But if the bones of the job, nobody looks, they'll look at the outside finishes.
Right.
Nobody looks at the foundation.
Right.
No, you're looking at the foundation. We're looking at the foundation. He's got to deal with the contract. You got to get this thing over the goal line.
Absolutely.
So-
And from the buyer's perspective, the contract gets sent to us from the seller's attorney. So we go through it, we make sure the buyer is well protected, and whatever additional items that they've already agreed to, like between the two parties, are in the contract. And normally, if the buyer is getting a mortgage, there's going to be a contingency in the contract which states that they have 45 days to get approved for the mortgage. If they can't get approved within that period, they provide a good faith decline letter, they're entitled to their entire down payment back and the contract is canceled. That's very big because as a buyer, you don't know if you really can get approved for many reasons. Number one, the bank has to approve the house, which Jamie can speak about with the appraisal and all of that, but they're not experts in mortgage financing either. So when the underwriting process is done from the bank, that's when they get their official word that they are approved. So they have that 45-day period to get approved.
To get their monies worked out.
And that's
on your
very
end. So you're
important
going to
from the
work
contract,
on
yeah.
the money side. You're going to work on the getting the
Conditions
conditions
side,
side, right? You know, we play a part, and if there is a violation or something, then we're going to make the problem go away, or at least get it in a position where everyone's good at the table and there's no surprises at the last minute.
No, we hope not. Yes.
Nobody wants a deal to fall apart within sight of the table, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a disaster for everybody involved. The buyer, right? They're emotionally invested, right? They can always see themselves flipping burgers in the back under the party lights, right? The seller's counting the cash, right? The other location is, everybody's ready to go. And
a lot of times the seller needs that money that they're selling to buy something else. So it's a chain reaction. You could have multiple deals get blown up by one mistake or mishap or, you know.
So the take home here is, I think, right? Make it look pretty, but then get the bones right before it gets here.
That's the best way.
That's the best way.
Yes.
So the real estate transaction market, especially in large cities and metropolitan areas like the New York area, I mean, you all know that it's no longer acceptable. Sellers don't want to find out 45 days later that the borrower can't qualify. So there's so much work that these folks are doing. So Karen points out the maybe things that the homeowner or the seller needs to do to make that house as attractive as possible. Luis comes in and reiterates that the bones of this home are super strong, all functional utilities, and that further strengthens the buyer's understanding that, hey, we're buying a house not only that looks good, but a house that truly is good. Josh, and on the attorney side, lenders can't come in later with and say, oops, I made a mistake on the approval. So on the mortgage side, not only are we doing approvals in advance, but we are now taking clients to underwriting so they get a firm, what's called commitment approval, a little bit of a technical term, but that means the underwriter's already looked at it before the house is even under contract. So we're doing all this preemptive work to just take all the guesswork out of the transaction so that when that homeowner, that listing client that Karen brought to the market and met up with Josh and has already, previewed the bones and structure of the home, they know that when that client signs on that transaction, that transaction is going to move forward and close in the 45 days without the surprises. So that's what this team does. This team, we're not a group that has surprises later. Occasionally there's some outliers that happen.
Life happens.
But really, we're buttoning this all down on the basis that
you didn't start last week at this, right? No. You've been at this for a little bit.
Yeah, so that's what we're, it's my job to make it all go smooth for them and so that they can have a smooth transaction. Absolutely.
Right, great. So, Karen, if you had to give a very hot, let's close out the seller side of it. If you had to give a, 30,000 foot view down of what you need to do for the seller, and then maybe we'll jump over to the buyers and talk about what happens on the buyer's side after they've transacted. But from the seller side, if you had to give if you were going to talk, if you were going to talk to the homeowner.
So in a
30,000. What does it look like? Right? What are you going to do?
Outline. First thing is a market analysis. Second thing is to get the proper professionals in to engage in due diligence. Third thing is to get my professional photographer in to take beautiful pictures after the home has been decluttered if necessary. And then it's the showings. It's getting Jamie involved in helping with open houses, pre-qualifying buyers. At that point, when we get an accepted offer after the negotiations are done, we get Josh involved. He sends out the contract. The two lawyers may negotiate some fine legal points back and forth. From there, Jamie gets busy on getting the mortgage for the buyer. Buyer gets approved for that mortgage. The title is then run. Hopefully there's no liens. If there is, they need to be taken care of. And then they have to get their homeowners insurance. And then once that's all done, the attorney set up the closing, and then it's party
And
time.
it's party time. Great. So the new buyer comes in. Maybe let's talk about that. I know, Luis, maybe speak about the warranty. You got a very special, I've never heard of anything really this lengthy, but maybe talk on that a little
I
bit.
am in the field, and I haven't even heard of anybody offering what I offer.
Right.
I offer a 5-year roof leak protection warranty, so it behooves me to do a good inspection on the roof.
Right.
Which means that, for example, if I go to a house and the roof looks to be in great condition, I use thermal imaging cameras to make sure there's no wet spots inside the house or moisture meters.
Yep.
If everything looks good, and I say in the report everything is good, but yet within 6 months after the clients move in, they happen to have a leak.
So the buyer just dropped $500,000.
Correct.
Right?
They don't want to
Suitcase-
drop any more money.
And maybe not yet, right? Maybe it's not
Yeah.
there, but something goes wrong.
Something goes wrong with the roof, I pay an extra premium for each of my inspections so that I can offer them a 5-year roof leak protection warranty. They are covered up to $3,000 in repairs.
In repairs.
God forbid a branch fell off
Yeah.
from a bad storm and it created a hole. That can be repaired up to $3,000, no cost to the clients. I also
That's
offer them
great.
a 1-year termite warranty as well, and 3 90-day warranties that include mold, sewer backup, and mechanical failure of the boiler. That's all part of the inspection.
That's part of your inspection.
Correct.
So from the buyer's standpoint, I mean, that's a no-brainer.
It's like
Correct.
a gift.
It's a gift.
It seems
Correct.
like it.
Because,
yes.
from my standpoint, I had to look at it. I'm saying this guy either is a fool or he really knows what he's doing. There's probably no in between, right? And you're probably not a fool. You've been in business for a while. Yeah.
About 48 years.
Yeah. Come on.
So
So,
from a legal standpoint, the second you close and the second the buyer owns that house, it's the responsibility of the buyer. It doesn't matter if the air conditioner blows out 10
It's their
minutes
headache.
after closing. It's the
Yeah.
buyer's
there's
responsibility.
no lemon law here.
No, there isn't.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's
So you're
very
giving
nice.
coverage. Now,
Sure.
and I remember the first, when we sold our co-op and we were looking at our first home, the house I was looking at, I knew I was outgrowing it. I just knew it. And thank God we didn't get that. we landed where we landed and I had room to grow into, but it was a smaller home. So maybe, Jamie, talk about, the transactions happen, they're in the house, and a few years out, or soon thereafter, or maybe they have ideas already. We love this house, but we need more space, but I don't know, whatever life circumstances. Maybe talk about maybe some other options after you've closed and they have the keys. Well, talk about that.
Well, you mentioned something that is very common and typical to everybody. You got into a co-op first, which are common and typical here in the metropolitan area. And you knew as you were turning the key that at some point you were going to be stepping up to a different type of residence. So a surprising statistic for most people is that the average length of a mortgage in the United States is 7 years. There's going to be a life event that's popping up. Okay, they're going to buy that maybe first place condo or co-op, or they're going to go into a single family house. Then their careers are maturing. Sometimes they're moving. Their careers are taking them elsewhere. Sometimes they're making a step up. We keep in touch with our clients, throughout their life. I tell clients at closings, hey, you're not done with me. I don't want you to make the first mortgage payment until we talk about getting you fully connected to the website and making payments. So communicating with buyers as they go on, and sometimes they need professionals. Sometimes they need other trades-related professionals that we know are reputable in the industry, and that's a great opportunity for us to recommend other people that we know after
Right.
they're already in the home.
Right. So they're going to go through a building project. They have options with you?
Sure. We're a very substantial renovation lender. So not new construction. New construction is really when you have a lot and you own the land and you want to build up. That's a very different thing than the renovation space. But the renovation space is for people that want to remodel their home. And we do that for people who are maybe buying, Karen is a great resource for some of those houses that are maybe depressed or damaged, but they're in the best neighborhood that you've always wanted to get into. And we have loans that can help people buy we call them a granny house, something maybe that's a little dated, and we can help you get in there, put $60,000 to $250,000 in renovation funds aside, and after you close, that building takes place over the next 6 months. So if you want to get into a home and turn it into the home you want, Meeting a skilled agent like Karen is the key, because Karen knows those people like us that can do those type of very specialized loans.
Right. So you've got a lot of
Different products.
arrows in the quiver,
That could
right?
be-
Well, you have to pull out for
Sure.
certain circumstances. Great. So you take care of them on the back end. Also, that's part of it. The gift,
Sure.
right? You have options for them on the back side, and now, Karen, if you're the maybe you're a buyer's agent, maybe speak to that point. And
Yeah,
how
so-
does that all kind of work in?
Sure. So I am a certified buyer's agent. That means I've gone through extra education to get my designation. So when a buyer comes into the picture, the very first thing is to get Jamie involved. Number one, I need to know what the budget is. How much of a down payment can they make? How much money can they spend on the home? Once that's determined, we start going shopping. Okay, I set them up with a program that I feed the criteria to, and then they can tell me what houses they want to see. We go shopping, they identify a house they want, we make an offer, we get their pre-approval given to the seller, along with a little story about the buyers and their financial position and how strong they are. And then hopefully the offer is accepted. A lot of time it's countered. And once it's all agreed upon, that's when Josh comes in. Back to the contract.
Back to the contract.
When it
Before
always
that
comes back to
happens-
the contract.
Right.
Luis has to come in to inspect the
Right.
house. It's imperative.
Right.
They need to know what they're buying. It's just like you said before. This is probably the number one asset within their financial
Right.
portfolio.
Right.
Very important to get it inspected.
Right. So from the seller standpoint, you come in on payroll. It's funded by the seller for preemptive footwork, so
Correct.
that it's not a problem later. On the buyer's side, right? You're
Very
in
important.
to protect their downside, right? But you occupy a very unique spot because you know the playbook to both sides.
I'm the maestro, and
On
I'm
both
getting
sides.
everybody together on both sides
on both sides.
from beginning to end.
And if I may say something,
Yeah.
the buyers, especially first-time home buyers, they, out of all of our highly professional involvement in the transaction, they would probably be happiest with the inspector, because the inspector will take away the misconception of that they're buying a money pit or,
Everybody's scared.
Right. And it's very important how an inspector holds the inspection and set the expectations, as they all do. As you notice, we all talk about setting expectations. Extremely important in the entire transaction, and that's what sets us apart from, I guess, most professionals.
Right.
But the I would take the homeowner by the hand, the buyer by the hand, show them all the systems, all the components, how things work, to make them feel acquainted and comfortable with the house. So that makes a big difference in the process as well.
Very
in spite of
important.
finding, of course, potential problems, and discussing them. How old is the roof? If the roof is too old, you may need to negotiate, because nowadays insurance companies will drop you. After you bought the house, they'll send their own inspector, and if they feel that the roof is too old, they're going to drop their policy unless they replace the roof. And that's an expense that they did not expect at all, kind of thing.
So let me just shift on this, and maybe this hits a nerve, I'm not sure. But let's talk about the homes in the floodplain on the South Shore, right? We all lived through Sandy 10 years ago,
Important.
right? So we were very, very active as a company in Sandy recovery, right? We were the largest volume architect for Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. We were clipping through 40 projects every 60 days. We were in the middle of Sandy for a long time. But the problems didn't always go away after, here we are years later. I mean, we still have someone messing around with Town of Hempstead. I just want to throw it out there. In the floodplain, what are you seeing? You're still seeing issues? Are you still seeing challenges?
Well,
that really changed the landscape of real estate on the South Shore there for a long time.
The ruling against flood damage per se, as I understand it, is that if your house had more than 40% damage overall, FEMA wanted you to raise the house.
Yeah,
And that can create an additional expense,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
And then, of course, once the house is been brought up and put in these temporary posts and tilts and stuff. How is it going to be structurally once you bring it back down? So it is important for me to really do a careful job after the house has been lifted, or any house really around flooding conditions, mold, water infiltration. These are the biggest problems.
I know 5 towns and Long Beach and Island Park and down through
all of our
parts of Hempstead and
Lindenhurst
Massapequa, Lindenhurst. I had a client, he showed me a video of him in full scuba gear swimming down Granada Parkway on his way down to the beach hut with his GoPro helmet on, blowing air out of the regulator. This was, post-op. This was post-Sandy, 2 days or during the storm. It was the craziest video you've ever seen. But so, are you seeing any residuals from, in the floodplain?
I mean, as far as the buyers are concerned, right after Sandy, they wouldn't even consider buying anything near the water. It was very rare. Now, people have calmed down, but they still ask the question, was this house flooded?
Right.
How high did it flood to?
Any pushback from the towns or anything like that in terms of any issues that you're seeing residual?
Such as, you mean with open permits or something?
Anything
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if the contractors didn't close out the permits, it happens a lot.
Oh my God.
A lot.
Oh
More often than we like to admit. I see it a lot.
In Hempstead, brutal. Brutal.
That's a really good example where the pre-check of the open permits comes in handy from the seller's point of view.
Right.
It's easy to close out those types of permits if the
And
work
it may
is
not
actually
need
done.
to be completely closed out, right? And maybe just land on this, last point. Dealing with the town is brutal. I mean, I was talking to an expert this morning. No one has any concept of what these poor folks have to go through in dealing with the towns. Nobody. You can't pay them enough. The problem doesn't need to necessarily go away, correct? It needs to be identified and worked towards.
Well, I mean, I guess if you're talking about leaving money in escrow after closing, yes, that's true. But legally, I mean, it's much better and safer for the purchaser, of course, to not have that problem after they close.
Right.
As their attorney, I would want that closed out if it's possible.
If possible.
Now, the buyer might have to have their kids moved into school by September and all that other kind of, situations that could occur. So if that's the case, we obviously do our best to protect them and work something out.
out. Right.
Yeah, of course.
Right. But the town is the great variable that nobody is going to control. Oh, God. They're not controlling. But you do your best to put them in a position to succeed.
Sure. Absolutely. We have to do our best to protect them and represent them.
Right.
They're the buyers. So if they want that house, they want to get into school, I mean, it's not my job to say, sorry, keep your kids at their old school another 3 months.
Great.
I can't say that to someone buying a house.
Great. So, I think we covered a lot of ground.
For sure.
I think, is anything that, any closing comments or remarks that maybe is,
I would love to add in one thing in again, these urban environments where, there's just not a lot of homes to sell. There's a challenge going on in the Northeast where there's not enough homes to sell. And we've stepped in to try and mitigate that by doing the upfront work. We have something called the Fairway Advantage approval, which is where we, instead of me as a professional with 23 years of experience reviewing those documents and saying, yes, this client's approvable and releasing an approval letter, we've now taken the step to send it into the underwriting. So it's not just me, it's a licensed underwriter. And what I mean by licensed is licensed with FHA, licensed with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac institutions, government-supported institutions that you may have heard about. And then a product that's been almost impossible to get, New Yorkers to listen to is we have something called the Fairway Cash Advantage, which is a product where we will not only send the client into underwriting, but then when the underwriter lists all those things that they want from that client, if we provide those items, we will give a rider to the contract of sale to the attorney that says, if for any reason this homeowner can't close on this home, we will buy the home. Or we will give the seller $10,000 and they can walk away from the transaction.
Ooh.
So unheard of. We've done over 1,100 of those transactions across the country. I guess New Yorkers are just skeptical. We're trying to get that across to agents. But I mean, that's as close as you can get. We call it the cash advantage because the
you're
idea.
So it's similar to Luis in that either he's a fool
That's a good
or
point.
he knows his stuff. So
That's-
either
that's
you're
correct.
a fool or you know your stuff.
And we haven't paid one out, and we don't intend to, because we're not in the business. People sometimes, misconceive the mortgage industry as wanting to get the house. Mortgage lenders, they want to lend money because that's all they're good at. That's what we're good at.
Right.
We don't do any other lending. We don't do checking and savings. We don't do anything. We work with top-notch realtors and attorneys, and we deliver mortgages in a very expedient fashion to the mortgage market.
So a homeowner can come to you with great confidence to know that they are ready to buy.
And we could turn and say to the seller, we know they're ready to buy because they've already been underwritten and because technically they're clear to close. All we need is your property address, your contract, and one appraisal.
That's a lot of confidence.
A lot of confidence.
That's a lot of confidence.
It's interesting that the bank, the buyer's bank, gives the seller a guarantee as well of that
I've never heard of
$10,000.
such
Me either.
It doesn't exist. We're the only
Wow.
entity in the mortgage business delivering that
They should be
product.
banging your door down, brother.
It's you got to get people to listen first, and that's sometimes challenging.
And Jamie, that's not the first time I've seen you get creative in helping homeowners obtain their American dream of home buying. We've had some tough clients together.
yeah.
And you have gotten some very, very creative through your research to get these people mortgages. And Josh, I've seen you get through some potentially ugly situations
Yes.
that we just got through very smoothly.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And it all starts with a great professional realtor. We're rowing the boat towards the same goal.
Right.
I mean, and Luis is in there first to say, hey, nobody gets in the boat until Luis says, hey, we've got
No holes in
a
the
good
bottom.
boat.
Yeah, right. Got it.
But I wanted to say also that it is imperative to have the right professionals on your side. Whether you're a first-time home buyer, just an investor, having a group like what we do, it's absolutely crucial
Sure.
to a successful transaction.
Yeah. Don't nickel and dime this. Find
Yeah.
the best.
No.
Real estate's unique because you have the buyer and the seller, and normally with law you have two opposing sides with different goals. Here you have both sides, the buyer and the seller, all with the same goal at hand. So
Right.
it's an
Everybody wants
interesting
this
dynamic
to work.
for sure.
Everybody wants
right.
this to work.
Absolutely.
Right? And everyone's goals on the backside is just a little bit different.
Sure, but
Right?
the ultimate goal.
Ultimate goal is we want to transact.
to
Get
and
to
exchange.
closing.
Yes.
Correct.
And we've done so many deals together that we know exactly how each other works, and we work in tandem with each other, and everything.
There are no issues in between.
Right, it
Yeah.
goes smoothly.
That's great. That's great. So,
We take care of what
well,
we need
thanks.
to take care
I
of.
think this was. I think there's a ton of good information.
Good.
I hope that this was worth your time. I hope that you gained value from it. That's always our goal, is always to add value. And so, from all the professionals here in Talking in the Shop, we wish you the best, and we'll see you the next time here at Talking Shop in the Shop. Thanks.